Hi, my guys. Great to be back together with you again for another chapter of the Tracker. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this book where we kind of left off. That he was following the doe, and he really felt like if he could touch her and not take her life, that he would actually be able to somehow save Grandpa. He's having a lot of deep feelings about that. He didn't understand why he couldn't kill the doe, and now he's realizing that if he can touch her and not hurt her, not kill her and take her life, that maybe he could save Grandpa. He could cheat death almost, is kind of what he was thinking. Sometimes when we go through hard times, such as what we're going through now, we sometimes start rationalizing and start even bargaining with God about what we will do in order to change the circumstances we're in. But we just have to walk in faith like John does as well. And we'll talk about that at the end of our reading. But maybe you guys could think about some Bible verses that if you were friends with John during this time and during the time that his grandfather is slowly dying, maybe you could give him some words of encouragement. He doesn't have a lot of friends at school, it feels like. He doesn't have too much of a social life. So if you were his friend, maybe a Bible verse or two that would encourage him about maybe death being a part of life. But we're going to continue reading, and we're going to continue reading to chapter 10. And also this book, it's a wonderful book. It's something I'd much rather talk to you about and read together in person than the way that we're doing it. But we're doing the best we can. As you can see, this is a lot of narration in this book, a lot less dialogue, because a lot of times it's just him and the deer, and obviously the deer is not talking to him. So it's a lot of thoughts going on in his head, just a lot of backtracking and thinking and reflecting. He has a lot of time for that. So this book is written a little differently than maybe something that we've read before, with a lot more banter or dialogue or even lighter content. This book is quite heavy in dealing with the death and the illness of his grandfather and having to kill an animal, which to him is fairly normal. But when we read about and we hear about an animal losing its life, it kind of hurts our hearts maybe. So it is a different type of book. But that's what I want you to see and understand, is that you can read different types of books, and some books can make you laugh, some books can make you cry, some books can completely be life-changing for you. So hopefully this is a book that, whether or not it really has resonated with you so far, it's something you push through and you finish, and you see just different types of writing, and then you can really understand what type of reader you are and what you would really rather watch, and what you'd rather not watch, but what you'd rather read. Would you rather read historical fiction? Would you rather read something a bit lighter with a comedic feel? Would you rather read nonfiction about events and people who really happened? So I like to give you different genres so you guys really understand as a reader what grabs your attention. So we're going to read chapter 10 together, and then when we have our Zoom call later in the week, we will do the final chapter together, and you guys can finish up. We can wrap up the story and do the AR on it, okay? So we're going to read together. I'm going to start reading chapter 10. Through the night he moved, weaving amongst the willows, flowing across the clearings, following her tracks, watching the doe change from a deer to something more and something less. She went mad into the night. She ran too hard and went down and fell, and he saw the splotch in the snow where it had happened, and at first he kind of smiled. Some part of him felt good that he had caused her to run, but then it changed to sadness, and he hoped that she wouldn't do that again. She wouldn't panic and fall and perhaps even hurt herself. But she ran in jerks through the night, great tearing runs that took all of her energy. She ran across clearings and amongst the willows and pine, away, away, always away from the sound of the steps that kept on coming. And John in some ways became less than he was before, less the hunter, less the man tracking her, and in some ways he became more than he was before. He took strength from the snow and the winter and the beauty of the night, and took power from the moon and the white light, and he kept on going. More than once he fell asleep while he was walking. From 3 a.m. on to daylight, he had a terrible time staying awake. His legs and body kept on, but his mind and his spirit went out, and he dropped face down into the snow, and it was hard to get up. Once he simply laid there and fell asleep, and the sleep just took him over, and he knew that if he didn't get up, he might sleep through the whole night, and he may freeze. But he still couldn't move. and wouldn't have moved except he heard the deer. The deer. He heard her move in the red willows in the white light, and he looked and saw her, and she was afraid, but she was somehow beckoning too, like she was calling him. The sound pulled him up, and he got up and stood on his feet and started walking again. In the night he changed. In the night he changed from following the deer to becoming the deer. A part of him went out to the deer, and a part of the deer went out of her into him across the white light, and he wasn't the same. He would never be the same again after this. He was of the deer and the snow and the night, and he kept himself, but he lost his spirit and gained a new one. I am not, but I am. I am the deer, he thought. It became a chant. I am not, but I am. I am the deer. A song that he did not sing aloud, but which went on inside of him before he followed the line of tracks to the deer, and he hoped she knew the song too, that she knew the beauty of the song and knew what the song meant to him, and that also he just meant her no harm. But she could not know that. She could not know only that this man kept following, staying on her trail the way no wolf would have ever done, spent energy the way no predator would have done, stayed and stayed and stayed until the fear was alive in her. Big-eyed terror. She was tiring in the night. Her muscles were quivering. She ran in bursts ahead of John, ran until she was out of sight, and then went down in the grass to rest. But always the steps kept on coming. In panic, in a clearing, she voided all of her fluids and solid waste in a pile that lay steaming in the snow, sinking, and she ran on. Meaning, voiding all of her fluids and solid waste mean that she went pee and poop. That's what that means. John came upon the pile, and it was still hot, still giving off airs, and he knelt down to smell it. He could taste the smell, acid on the sides of his tongue, and he looked up, and he knew from the smell and the taste, he knew that no other deer would have that smell or taste, and even if he lost the trail, now he could go by the smell, and that it wasn't the same. That made him different. He couldn't smell that way before, and that made part of him the doe. He would stay on her, keep after her until he owned her. No, more than that, more than owning. He would touch her, and touch himself, and touch his grandfather's spirit, and touch death, and he would win. It was all with the doe, all of it, and he loved her. He would touch her, and he loved her deeply. What she was and the way she looked and what she meant, she had brought him out, danced before him in the winter, danced and pulled him into the swamp. Part of him said that it couldn't be, but another part of him knew that that doe had come for him in the barn, come for him and just danced away. In the night he was crazy, a little, and some of it came from being tired, and some of it came from thinking about his grandfather. The craziness came in short flashes and mixed with being not crazy, so he really couldn't tell the difference, and he didn't care. The gray of false dawn showed him closer to the doe. He could see her now, see her often. Her bursts of running, open-mouthed and hard, stretched only 200 yards, and he saw her moving ahead in the willows and across the clearings, looking back in fright, spit dripping from her mouth and from her tongue. The deer. And when full light came, he hated himself as much as he loved the deer. She was running until her front legs collapsed, running until she caved in, and she plowed down into the snow and then up, staggering, trying to run, and he hated himself for driving her that way, but he couldn't stop, couldn't make himself stop. She was so exhausted. She was falling down herself. He must touch her. He must own her. He must own, love, touch the deer. And when that happened, his grandfather would not die. We're going to stop right there. It's what he really believes. He believes that if he can just touch this deer and go home to Grandpa, that his grandfather would survive. He's just having these feelings inside. He's really struggling with his grandfather being sick. So again, I want you to think about it. What Bible verse, look up a verse that you would give him, maybe for some comfort or encouragement during this time. And I can't wait to see you in just a few days, and we're going to finish up the book together, okay? I'll talk to you guys really soon. Love you all.